It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160, online at WCCSradio.com. And our conversation with Chris Cilizza is brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Personal Injury Law Firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. The book is called Power Players, Sports, Politics, and the American Presidency. And Chris is on the line with us right now. Chris, this is so much fun, this book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was. I always say it was mostly fun to write. Writing is not always fun, so I don't want to say it was a joy to write, because there were times when it was a little less fun and times when it was more fun. But overall, it's sort of a passion project.
Yeah, it's interesting you say it that way, too, because let's face it, some presidents are more fun than others.
Yeah, and some are sportier than others. I mean, I wound up doing 13 presidents from Eisenhower to Biden, and, some of them, like George Herbert Walker Bush, who I think is sort of the beating heart of the book, were great. He was into basically any sport you could think of. He was this tremendously competitive guy. He played baseball at Yale. He would compete against his grandkids when he got older as to who could fall asleep faster. Like, he was perfect. And then there were others, like Lyndon Johnson, who, despite growing up in the sort of football-crazy South of the time, was not only bad at sports, probably our worst sportsman president that I looked at, but also had zero interest in sports. So it ran the gamut, though I would say with the exception of Johnson, the other 12 are there are significant sports ties to each of them, whether they played it, whether they used sports. They all sort of understood the common language that sports speaks to the American public. Johnson was sort of the lone exception.
Yeah, you sort of get the feeling that Teddy Roosevelt is the grandfather of them all, but
I think he absolutely is. I mean, I think Roosevelt understood. I mean, he wanted to project this image of sort of a manly, boisterous presence and sporty presence in the White House. I mean, he was an outdoor sportsman primarily, but he understood the power that sports and competition have. And Roosevelt and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, by the way, both were very focused on sports as preparation for war, particularly football. They were both very into preserving football and promoting football for that reason. They believed it was sort of the way that American young men could be trained for war.
It's also interesting that you talk about the political aspect of what was going on with presidential sports as the theme of the book. A lot of the presidents, particularly when we're considering the sport of golf, they used it not only to help them in their job, but in their relationships and their diplomatic relationships with foreign leaders.
That's right. I mean, if you think about golf, the thing people both like and hate about it is how long it takes. It's four to I guess about 6 hours, depending on how good or bad you are, or how slow the play is. But I think a lot of presidents valued that time. I know Bill Clinton spoke very eloquently about sort of liking that golf took a while because he could get settled into it. He could build relationships with people in a way that it's harder to do if you're playing basketball against them, or baseball. Not that there's a lot of pickup baseball going on in the country, but golf is a sport sort of uniquely suited to conversation and relationships, that you hit a shot, you talk a little bit, you drive in the car, you hit another shot, you talk a little bit, you drive in the car. And I think a lot of them understood that was a way they could build those relationships with foreign leaders and with members of either their own party or the opposite party in American politics.
And golf is also a sport that is particularly suited to presidents because of the age factor. You can keep playing golf well into what would typically be retirement years from athletic competition.
We're seeing that now with Joe Biden, by the way, who is actually quite a good golfer, one of the better golfers we've had as president. He doesn't play a lot, but yes, I mean, he's 80 years old. You're not going to go out and play pickup basketball at 80. I guess you could, but you'd probably only play once, and then you'd tear your knee up or something. So, yes, golf is a sport that is uniquely suited to it. I also wrote about pickleball solely because I do think pickleball is this like massively fast-growing sport in the U.S. and is a sport that is directly sort of aimed at people who are a little bit later in life, as a sport that you may see future presidents play, just because it does seem to fit the demographic of people who wind up as president in terms of age.
Hey, you start the book with a couple of presidents in golf, and Eisenhower, who is one of my favorite presidents, if not the favorite, he played a ton of golf, but he's an example of somebody who used golf in order to accomplish his job. John F. Kennedy is another who used it in the same way, but there was subtle differences in the way that Kennedy approached golf, simply because of perceptions.
Totally. Yeah. So Kennedy and Democrats generally had been very critical of Eisenhower for how much he played golf, that he was sort of mostly playing golf and doing a little bit of the presidency. And, those criticisms were somewhat fair in that Eisenhower played more golf than any modern president. That includes Trump and Obama. He played a massive amount of golf. He would take 3 months off and go to Colorado to play golf. Now, he would work then, too, but he was mostly playing golf. He was playing 36 holes a day. Kennedy was mindful of that. Kennedy was also mindful of the fact that he came from this patrician, blue-blood New England family. What he didn't want is any more associations with elitism. Golf, especially at the time, and I think still somewhat, but certainly in the 60s, was still sort of associated with country clubs and wealth. And Kennedy was a really gifted golfer, actually. Really nice natural swing, shot pretty low scores, but you never sort of know about that because the Kennedy folks worked very hard to keep that from the public. What they instead focused on, of course, is the thing that everyone thinks of when they think of the Kennedys in sports, which are those touch football games played at the compound in Massachusetts. Now, the issue with that is, of course, JFK's health was so bad that a lot of times he could barely participate in those games. He really struggled with back problems throughout his life. Interestingly enough, the back problems could have been the result of football. He played football at Harvard as a freshman, and one game after the game, a family friend sort of jokingly tackled him and hurt his back, and there's at least some speculation that is one of the roots of his back problems throughout his life.
Yeah. You mentioned George Herbert Walker Bush. The Bush boys themselves, they are fascinating characters when it comes to sports and baseball in particular. And one of the great moments, certainly in George W. Bush's presidency, but really in American presidential history, is him after 9/11.
Yes, absolutely. So what's interesting about that is Major League Baseball. So it's the Yankees and the Diamondbacks, Arizona Diamondbacks, and Major League Baseball initially asks Bush to throw out the first pitch of the first game of the World Series, which is in Arizona. The first 2 games were in Arizona. Bush says, no, I'll do it, but I want to do it in New York, which is sort of, the epicenter of the 9/11 attacks. So he is underneath Yankee Stadium warming up prior to throwing the pitch, and Derek Jeter, the captain and sort of face of the Yankees, comes by and asks Bush if he's going to throw off the mound or in front of the mound. And Bush says, I think I'd probably throw in front of the mound just to make sure I get it there, as many presidents do. And Jeter tells him, I think you probably should throw it from the mound. So Bush has to sort of reconnoiter and reconsider what he's planning. And then as Jeter is walking out of the batting cages as Bush is warming up, Jeter says to Bush, don't bounce it. So that's what's on Bush's mind when he comes out. But yeah, I think sort of symbolically, if you go and watch the video, and it's pretty powerful stuff, when Bush gets announced into the stadium, there's sort of a murmur and there's some nervousness you can tell in the crowd. Remember, we're a month removed from 9/11. There are threats against the country. There are threats against Bush still sort of coursing through the public. He goes out there, he gets on the mound on the rubber, he throws a perfect strike, and the crowd goes absolutely bananas. And you can see at that moment that it is about more than just a ceremonial first pitch, right? It's about sort of saying to the world, we're down, but we're not out, that we're going to get up, we're resilient. And I think that moment typifies why it's not just sports and it's not just politics, that these two things have been inextricably linked for decades, and in that moment really sort of came together.
Chris Cilizza is our guest. The book is Power Players, Sports, Politics, and the American Presidency. And some other interesting things I found in the book, especially the Richard Nixon thing. Nixon used his connection to sports almost as therapy. He went bowling all by himself in the basement of the White House. That's such a sad picture, but I guess if you're going to picture any president in that situation, it's him.
Yeah, it's so fitting, I think. I totally agree with you. So Nixon would... around 10 o'clock at night, he by the way, he told the press corps this. He was not shy about this. He said, around 10 o'clock at night, when I'm feeling stuffy, were his words. So I think when he was feeling sort of down or not great, he would go to the bowling alley that he had installed in the White House, 2 lanes, and he would bowl between 7 and 12 games by himself.
Jeez.
Now, he became a pretty able bowler. He wound up bowling at 229 at one point in his career. He had 7 strikes in that game, including 4 in a row. But, yeah, that image to me was so striking. Nixon, sort of our loner president, right? The guy who struggled with small talk, struggled with social interaction. The idea of him by himself, suit and tie, or at least shirt and tie at that point, bowling frame after frame by himself, just powerful stuff. And to your point, a little bit sad.
Yeah, it is. The book is so much fun to read. Tell me why you decided to write it.
Well, it was a little bit selfish, to be honest. Once I gave up my dreams of being in the NBA at about age 13, I realized I had to have another career. So I knew I wanted to go into journalism. I just didn't know what kind, and I assumed sports because I was always passionate about sports. I wound up going into political journalism, but always kept sort of that flame for sports, always interested in it, followed it passionately. And so when my editor came to me and said, do you want to write a book? I said, well, if I do, I want it to be in this space. So we thought about it, went around and around, and, what we wound up coming up with was, let's look at the sports presidents played, both as kids and as adults, the sports they loved, the sports they watched, and figure out what does that tell us about who they were as men and how they governed as presidents. So that's the elevator pitch for the book. But again, it came out of a selfish desire to sort of be in those two twin spaces that I've always been so passionate about.
Well, you do it so well, and we loved reading it. Chris, tell me how folks can learn more about the book and about you.
So you should be able to get anything, any book of mine at Amazon, at bookshop.org, at Barnes & Noble, at an In Real Life bookstore. You can get the Kindle version. I read the audiobook version. So if you like my voice, go pick it up. If you don't like my voice, don't go pick it up. Buy the regular hardback cover. But it should be basically anywhere you get books.
Beautiful, beautiful. Chris, thanks for spending some time with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your interest.
Have a great day.
Okay.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com.